All right, hello and welcome. We're so glad that all of you could join this discussion this evening, this conversation about this wonderful film, Out from the Wings. And I'm sitting next to Michael Montoya, the director who's joined us from New York. We're so glad to have you here in Dallas. And this is Lily Weiss, who's going to help lead our conversation.
Let's start with Michael.
Okay.
So we saw your film tonight, and many of us have seen it several times. In addition to all the reasons you mentioned on the film, what was your major impetus for it?
Well, this started off as a project for the New York City Arts and Education Roundtable. They had a grant opportunity for creating lessons, arts lessons, that would address the needs of marginalized and underserved communities in the arts. They wanted to create something, it was during the COVID pandemic, so they wanted something that was asynchronous, that could be accessed online. And so I did think about my own experiences in dance and experiences that have been shared with me by other dancers. And I thought, well, this is a great opportunity to share our stories online. And so it started off with those lessons, which is still available online if anybody wants to access it through the Arts and Education Roundtable. But I thought I just really want to get these stories out to a broader audience. And so I re-edited the whole thing into the film and have been sharing it around the country for the last 2 years.
And the support, the fact that it came from New York's roundtable in an educational setting, I think is quite commendable and really an example for many states to follow. So I applaud you for that. And I applaud you because it's not easy in education, and it's certainly not easy in particular states. So I'm laughing at that point because we all have had that experience. But this is for the panel, and you can jump in, and I can call on you too, either one. I'm a 4-decade arts educator, so I know how to do that as well. But what I want you to do, and really think about this, coming from your own experience, dancer, choreographer, educator, administrator, presenter, or all of the above, respond to the film. And it can be several ways. And it's interesting because you talk about this in the film. Many answers from different ages, and we all go through our different roles. All of them are valid, and how you feel is valid during that time. So hop in.
I'll start.
Okay.
So I dance for a company called Bruce Wood Dance, and my initial reaction to that film was that I am just so grateful for the career that I've had and where I am now. And I am really coming from a place of just pride in the environment that my artistic director, Joy Bollinger, has created, and her predecessor, Bruce Wood, really was a pioneer of creating an environment that allowed for male-on-male partnering, female-on-female partnering, dance that is expressed beyond just sexual identities and that kind of heteronormative narrative that you talked a lot about. And so for me, I think it's important to say that a lot of that was based off of like the ballet world. And so I think I just feel like so grateful to be kind of like a shining example of how we have progressed a lot in the dance world. And where I am now, I feel very open, very free to be myself fully. And so I'm sure that it is due to many people like yourself that came before and allowed us to be more and more of who we are.
That's my turn. I'd like to answer it from an education standpoint. I found parts of it incredibly frustrating because as an educator who is, Lily's nodding because you probably feel the same way, we work so hard in our rooms to open them up and for them to be inclusive and to be diverse and equitable as possible. And I come from a ballet background, but I also come from a modern and contact improvisational background. And so I try to neutralize the room as much as possible and decentralize ballet and not use gendered terms and create opportunities for partnering in which the gender it has never entered the space. And then to hear these stories, which I know are so true because I hear it from my students and I hear it from professional dancers and actors that I work with, that the experience is just so heavy that no matter how great we make these rooms, there's only a few of us who are really doing it.
Yes.
And it's frustrating as an educator that more of our colleagues are not working to make the rooms safe and brave. And I know there's a great deal of them, but it's not all of us, and that is part of the problem. And then just to hear these artists in New York talking about the same problems that we face here in Texas, it's just such a global problem that I just wish there was something more that we could be doing. And so films like this are incredibly helpful. So, thank you.
Charles?
I'm a presenter, former dancer. I look at it a little bit differently because I live in the business of the dance world, and I'm not in one discipline anymore. I was a modern dancer, and so I spend a lot of my time in the ballet world, a great deal of my time in the contemporary world, and a great deal of time now in world dance. So I love that this film has been made because it brings light to this topic. But I don't agree with a lot of the parts of the film about changing things. One of the frustrations I'm hearing around the globe is the difficulty that the teaching technique has become mired with politically correct language beyond, when we should be just doing the technique. And I understand that frustration on both sides of that argument. I do love, the idea of taking gender out of dance doesn't work for me. For me, that's an erasure of history, of how these roles were created. And so much of dance today came from these original iconic roles. And I'm not a big traditional ballet person, but I do love when I go see it, that's what I'm going to go see. But I love equally is a reinterpretation. Someone that has chosen to do, a Romeo and Juliet that's two women or two men or a man and woman. There's a company that's doing that fantastic. Of course, Matthew Bourne's, done his. He's always screwing around with all of them, but he really did it with Swan Lake. But then you look at Kyle Abraham with Untitled Love, and it's centered around three couples, and one of them is transitioning through in real life through this whole process, and that has been allowed to happen in the work. And Kyle's movement vocabulary is wide open to all parts of his life. But and when I was dancing in the company I was in, we had 5 men. We were all strangely tall. We were all over 6 feet. It was fantastic to do a men's piece. It was great to dance with, and I'm a gay man, and I love the dancing with a woman and in that character role that we did. In my role as presenter now, I'm always looking for interesting projects. Quality is the first thing. But as a commissioner, I'm typically looking to commission works that are outside that norm. I think the last one was with you, right? Was it? I think that was the last commission piece. Yeah.
Norbert?
Yeah, with Norbert was the last one, and I specifically told the choreographer I wanted this particular choreographer, I wanted this particular dancer, and this other male dancer, and I wanted a male duet because we don't have enough of them in our world of dance. And so I'm always looking for those kinds of interpretations, but I think there's room for all of it. And so I'll leave it at that because there's probably more coming later.
So I'm going to interject another question that is related. How do your audiences fit into this? Or how do you, as an audience member, feel about gender roles or non-gender roles? And it's interesting because many of us in our dance life, we're all contemporary people. We're all modern dancers, and I'm looking around, and I know Charles and I years ago, but we're also very physical dancers, and that is non-gender, right? That whole physicality. So when I say audiences, I'm also counting, and I'm looking at Danielle because I know she works in an educational institution, and I know the issues that come with working with a bureaucratic public educational institution. And where does that come into play? How does that play with your colleagues who feel pressured that they can't be open? They can't be that open. So I'm throwing that out there.
I'll start.
Okay.
I'm in a really lucky situation that my colleagues are very much like me and willing to take the risk. And I have a very supportive administration at my school that trusts me and says you're the expert, and if you want to make these sorts of artistic decisions, we will back you up. That it could change at any moment in time.
Right.
I just have been incredibly lucky in my position. But it is something that I have to think about. I have to think about my classroom, I have to think about my students, I have to think about their comfort level, and it's a mixed room. And I can't make any assumptions about what anybody thinks, feels, is willing to do. And so, in a way, I do try to remove the politics of it, which is the politics of the body, out of it, and we are here to dance. And I always tell my students, and I tell dancers that I work with, that like the technique is your foundation, but it is not your identity.
That's right.
And so we're going to work on the dance, and we're here to dance. And it's the same thing that I tell my administrators at my school. This is dance. This is storytelling. This is a peek into something that is very human, and what is more human than just existing. Be that two men together, two women together, two non-binary people together, two asexual people together. It doesn't matter. It's just people moving together to tell a story, or to not tell a story, just to make some shapes. And so that's how I try to approach all of it from an educational standpoint. I love the history of it. I have a historian background. It's like I want to educate people on the history of where dance came from, and that goes past ballet, right? That goes into ancient movement theories. And so we look at how dance started. It really actually wasn't about gender. And then it became very much about it because it helped us understand what each person goes through. And then ballet did what ballet did. And I have a great appreciation for it, because without it, we wouldn't get to where we are today.
That's right.
You know? So we have to appreciate every step along the way and acknowledge it, respect it, see it, and then do what comes next from it, which I think is where we are right now on that precipice of what comes next.
Absolutely.
As a presenter in Texas, I'm a born and bred Texan, but I moved here from New York. We're in a relatively conservative, getting more conservative environment. I have to pander to audiences I shouldn't say pander, but I have audiences I got to deal with. So there's always a balance act, and I always tell people, this season may be more pushing the boundary, next season may be more mainstream. But I reached a point where there were really incredible works that we weren't doing because I couldn't, I was going to get in trouble. Most of them nudity, because everybody goes crazy here about nudity. And so at TITAS, we created a new series called TITAS Unfiltered with the tagline, "If you're easily offended, don't come." And we put into that series things that it's always going to be nudity or maybe a little bit of subject matter, but it's been nudity. And we, our subscribers could opt out of those shows. But if you came, we were very clear that this is what's going to be. Of course, now everybody wanted to go because they want to be a part of the cool club, which is what we want. But we had to build to get to that point. And I remember you saying to me when we brought Crystal Pite's Bentroffenheit, it was such a progressive, such an important piece. And you had said, Lily had said, 5 years ago when we did this, we wouldn't have been able to present this piece. We had to build the audience to get there. And so I think people expect TITAS to push the boundaries. And we have to play with that to some degree. How far can we push? How often can we push? And sometimes it's also about what's available in the market at any given year that we're looking. And there's great works I've been trying to bring that just can't fit it. The calendar and the tour dates don't hook up. So a big part of my life is about building the audience, educating them without speaking down in any way. You just want to education by making them a little bit uncomfortable. I'm okay with that. Hate mail I get all the time, and you always respond. And I'll share that email after Cole talks.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
After I talk? Well, I'll say this. I am coming once again from a place of privilege because when I go see art, can find myself regardless of who's on stage. I really have identified many times as Juliet, and I'm not like a little girl because she's like 14. Mm-hmm. So I struggled with the idea, but I know that there needs to be representation always. But I also struggle with the idea of like going to a show and not seeing myself on stage because I've seen myself on stage no matter what the show has been. So I think that part of what you're talking about in the film is difficult to like process for myself. Just because I always see myself, or I always find a part of myself on stage, and I wish more people that had that kind of like a struggle to feel represented. I wish that they could feel that way.
I think for me, and I can speak only for myself, but I think part of my struggle is because I'm trans. So being raised as a socialized female, but knowing internally that I was not, and transitioning to male, but still carrying with me the socialization. There's a lot of mix in who I am that is very different from how people represent it in shows. And I'm seeing less representation now. Now, I don't know statistics on dance, but I know that GLAAD tracks television shows and characters lesbian, gay, bisexual, transition, and our representation is going down. It's difficult for me when I watch and I see there's little snippets of parts of who I am, but I never see anybody who's full me. I mean, yes, I'm trans, I'm an artist, I'm also a dad. I have children, I'm a member of the PTA, I go to soccer games, there's all these parts of me that there's little snippets, but I've never seen anyone on stage, on TV, in a movie. That's me. I was just thinking the other day, like, what would it be like to see a trans man as the lead in a rom-com? As the leading man? Like, that would help me tremendously. But that could be just because of my personal experience, because there's a lot of mixture in who we are as transgender people. And I feel that there's something to fear of that, rather than people looking at us like, wow, here's a great experience that we can learn from. It's, wow, you're so different, we want to push you away, and we don't want to see that. Or we're the butt of the joke, or we're a stereotype. So I don't, as one of the dancers showed in the film, like I don't want to be your diversity quota. I'm a human being. Yes. And that's, I guess, what I struggle with, is I want to see a human being that's like me as a human being.
I really like that, Michael, that you touched on the word fear, because I do think there's fear of something that's different or someone that's different. And we were talking about this earlier today, that people can sometimes express that they feel their whole lifestyle is threatened, or there's something being pushed on them, when in fact it's just a matter of allowing space for everyone to be who they need to be.